My name is Ava Ramsey. I am 34 years old and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. The turkey on my plate was cold, but that wasn't why I couldn't eat. I sat at the dining table in my childhood home in Asheville, looking at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me. My father, my stepmother Valerie, my younger brother Cole, they were laughing. They were drinking wine. They looked happy. I had flown all this way just to ask one specific question, but I had been too afraid to ask it until now. I took a deep breath. I needed to know. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice very steady, "did the hospital mail the surgery appointment letter? It should have arrived last week." The laughter stopped for a second. Then my father chuckled. He waved his hand in the air as if my question was a joke. "Oh, relax, Ava," he said. "We didn't bother with that medical nonsense. We used those funds for Cole's 27th birthday bash instead." "You missed a great party." Cole grinned at me across the table. "It was epic, sis, best night of my life." My blood turned to ice. They didn't just spend money, they didn't understand what they had done. I looked at my brother, who was smiling, completely unaware of the war happening inside his own body. I slowly set my fork down on the table. The metal made a sharp clink against the china. The room went silent. I looked directly into my father's eyes. "So," I said quietly, "I guess you still don't know who actually needed that surgery. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from?" My name is Ava Ramsey. I am 34 years old. To understand why that moment at the dinner table broke me, you have to understand who I was to them. I wasn't really a daughter. I wasn't really a sister. I was a safety net. I was a wallet. I was the person they called when reality became too expensive. For 10 years, I had been the invisible engine keeping the Ramsey family running. It started small. When I was 24 and just starting my career in marketing, my father called me. He said things were tight that month. He asked for $200 for groceries. I sent it immediately. I felt proud. I felt like an adult helping her parents. But tight months became every month. Then came Cole. Cole is 7 years younger than me. He was the golden boy. He was charming, handsome, and completely allergic to responsibility. My parents adored him. They looked at him and saw a star. They looked at me and saw a bank account. When Cole graduated high school, he wanted to go to a private art college in Savannah. My parents couldn't afford the tuition. They didn't tell him no. They told him maybe, and then they called me. I remember sitting in my small apartment, eating instant noodles because I was saving for a house. My father was on the phone. "Ava," he said, his voice heavy with fake guilt. "It's his dream. You know how talented he is. We just need a little help with the first semester. We'll pay you back when the tax return comes." I paid the tuition. They never paid me back. The tax return came and went. They bought a new television instead. That was the pattern. For the next 6 years, I paid for everything. I paid Cole's tuition. When he complained that the dorms were cramped and hurting his creativity, I paid the deposit and the monthly rent for a penthouse apartment near campus. It was nicer than the place I lived in. I told myself I was being a good sister. I told myself that family supports family, but it wasn't just rent. It was the lifestyle. One afternoon, Cole called me. He sounded frantic. "Ava, I'm at the dealership. I need a cosigner or I lose the car." "What car?" I asked. "A BMW, he said. "Mom and Dad said it fits my brand. I need to look successful to be successful, right? But my credit isn't established yet." "Cole, a BMW is expensive," I said. "Why don't you get a used Honda?" My mother grabbed the phone from him. "Ava, don't be jealous. Your brother has an image to maintain. He's going to be an influencer. This is an investment. Just sign the papers. Don't be difficult." "Don't be difficult." That was their favorite phrase. I signed. I paid the insurance. When Cole got parking tickets, I paid those too. When he maxed out his credit cards buying designer clothes for Instagram photos, I paid off the balances so his credit score wouldn't tank. I worked 60 hours a week. I missed my own vacations. I wore clothes from discount stores. I drove a 6-year-old sedan with a dent in the bumper. Meanwhile, my brother drove a brand new luxury car that I paid for. I was invisible unless I was paying for something. I remember one Christmas specifically. I had just received a big bonus at work. I was excited to tell them. I drove home, the trunk full of gifts. I had bought my dad a specialized grill he wanted. I bought Valerie a designer handbag. I bought Cole the latest camera gear. I walked in and they barely looked up from the TV. "Hey," I said, putting the bags down. "Merry Christmas." "Oh, good you're here," my dad said without standing up. "Did you bring the wine?" Valerie forgot to buy red wine. I brought gifts," I said. "Great," he said. "But we need wine. Can you run back out and get it?" I went back out. I bought the wine. When I came back, they were opening the gifts. They didn't wait for me. "Thanks for the grill," Dad said, already looking at the instructions. "Cole, look at this camera lens. This is going to be great for your vlog." "Thanks, Ava," Cole said, not looking at me. He was already attaching the lens to his camera. Nobody asked how my job was. Nobody asked about my life. Nobody gave me a gift. Valerie saw me looking at the empty space under the tree where my present should have been. "Oh, honey," she said, waving her hand. "We've been so busy with Cole's launch party, we didn't have time to shop. We'll get you something next week." They never did. That night, I cried in the guest bedroom. It wasn't about the presents. I could buy my own things. It was the fact that I didn't exist to them as a person. I was just a resource. I was a utility, like electricity or running water. You only notice the electricity when it stops working. But I didn't stop. I kept paying, I kept showing up. I thought if I just gave enough, if I just supported them enough, eventually they would love me back. Eventually they would say, "Thank you, Ava, we appreciate you." I was wrong. I was teaching them that they could take everything from me, and I would thank them for the opportunity. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the emotional erasure. If I had a bad day, they changed the subject. If I was sick, they told me to take some vitamin C and stop complaining. But if Cole had a headache, the whole house went quiet. If Cole was sad, my mother cooked his favorite meal. I was the responsible one, the strong one, the one who didn't need anything. They didn't know how tired I was. They didn't know I was lonely. They didn't know that every time I swiped my card for them, a little piece of my heart hardened. And then the diagnosis happened. And for the first time, being the one who handled everything became a matter of life and death. It started with a coffee cup. About 8 months before that Thanksgiving dinner, I was visiting Cole at his apartment, the one I paid for. I was there to drop off groceries because he said he was too broke to eat, even though I saw new shoes by the door. Cole was in the kitchen. He went to pick up a mug of coffee. His hand trembled. He couldn't grip the handle. The mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Hot coffee splashed everywhere. "Damn it," he yelled. He grabbed his wrist, his face twisting in pain. "Are you okay?" I asked, rushing over to grab a towel. "It's fine," he snapped. "My hands have just been stiff lately. It's probably from editing videos all night or the gym." But I looked at his hands. His knuckles were swollen. They looked red and angry. He was 26 years old. His hands shouldn't look like that. "Cole, that doesn't look like gym strain," I said. "How long has this been happening?" "A few weeks," he mumbled. "It's worse in the mornings. I can barely button my shirt sometimes. Don't tell Mom and Dad. They'll just freak out and make it a whole drama." I knew he was right. If Mom and Dad knew, they would make it about them. They would cry about how unfair it was. They would post about it on Facebook for sympathy. But they wouldn't actually do anything. They wouldn't schedule appointments. They wouldn't research doctors. "I'm taking you to a specialist," I said. "I can't afford a specialist, Ava," he said. "I'll pay for it," I said. Like I always did. I took time off work. I drove him to the appointments. I sat in the waiting rooms while he scrolled on his phone. The first doctor dismissed it. He said Cole was too young for arthritis. He said it was tendinitis. But I pushed. I saw how much pain my brother was in. I saw him wince when he tried to tie his shoes. I found Dr. Nolan Beckett. He was a specialist in autoimmune disorders. He didn't dismiss us. He ran blood tests. He did imaging. 2 weeks later, we sat in Dr. Beckett's office. The room was cold and smelled like antiseptic. Cole looked bored, swinging his leg. I was nervous. Dr. Beckett put the scans on the screen. "It's not tendinitis," Dr. Beckett said. His voice was serious. "Cole, you have aggressive rheumatoid arthritis. It's early stage, but it is moving very fast. Your inflammation markers are off the charts." Cole stopped swinging his leg. "So, give me some pills." Dr. Beckett shook his head. "It's not that simple. Because of how aggressive this is, if we don't treat it hard and fast, you could have permanent joint damage within a year. We need to do surgery on your right wrist immediately to clear the inflamed tissue and save the tendon. Then, we need to start you on a biologic medication. It's a specialized treatment." "Surgery?" Cole went pale. "I can't have surgery. I have events. I have to travel." "If you don't do this," Dr. Beckett said, "you might lose the use of your hand. You won't be traveling anywhere." Then came the price tag. The surgery, the hospital stay, the rehabilitation, and the first year of the biologic drugs. It was expensive. Insurance covered some, but not all of the specialized care Dr. Beckett recommended for the best outcome. I looked at the estimate, it was huge. Cole looked at me, he didn't look at the doctor, he looked at me. The look said, "Fix this." I took a deep breath. "I'll handle it." I made a plan, I had savings. I had an inheritance from my grandmother that I had never touched, money I was saving for my own future, maybe a wedding one day, or a house. I decided to create a medical trust. I didn't want to just give the money to Cole. I knew he would spend it on clothes or trips, and I definitely didn't want to give it to my parents. If Valerie and Dad saw that much money, they would find a better use for it. I went to a lawyer. I set up a trust specifically for Cole's medical expenses. I put $178,000 into it. It was almost everything I had. I told Cole the plan. "This money is for the surgery and the medicine," I told him sternly. "Nothing else, it is locked in a trust. I am the trustee. I will release the funds directly to the hospital when the date is set." Okay, Cole said. He looked relieved. "Thanks, Ava, you're the best. Do not tell Mom and Dad about the money," I warned him. "Tell them about the diagnosis. Tell them you need surgery, but do not tell them there is a pile of cash sitting in a bank account. Do you understand?" "I understand," he promised. "I won't say a word." I believed him. I thought that for once he understood the gravity of the situation. This was his health, this was his body. Surely he wouldn't risk that for anything. I notified the hospital. We were just waiting for the surgery date. Dr. Beckett said it would be in November, around Thanksgiving. I felt good. I felt like I had saved him. I had done the responsible thing. I had protected him from the disease, and I had protected the money from our parents' greed. I didn't know that while I was building a safety net, they were already looking for a pair of scissors to cut it down. October came. The leaves were changing color. The air was getting crisp. I was busy at work. My company needed me to go to London for 2 weeks for a major client launch. It was a big opportunity for me. I called Cole before I left. "I'm going to be in London," I said. "My phone service might be spotty during the day. If the hospital calls with the surgery date, email me immediately and I will authorize the payment from the trust." "Okay, got it," Cole said. "Have fun in London. Bring me back something cool." I flew to London. I threw myself into work. I was exhausted but happy. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about my family's problems every hour of the day. 3 days into the trip, I got an email. It appeared to be from the bank where the trust was held. It was a notification of a withdrawal request. I frowned. I hadn't requested a withdrawal. I tried to log into the banking app, but the Wi-Fi in the conference center was terrible. By the time I got back to my hotel, it was late in London, but afternoon in the US. I called the bank immediately. "This is Ava Ramsey," I said. "I'm the trustee for the Ramsey Medical Trust. I received a notification about a withdrawal, but I didn't authorize one." The banker sounded confused. "Miss Ramsey, but I spoke to you yesterday." "No," I said, my stomach dropping. "You didn't, I'm in London." "I spoke to a woman who identified herself as Ava Ramsey," the banker said. "She had all the security answers. She had your social security number. She was very emotional. She said her brother needed emergency surgery immediately. She said the hospital required the payment up front or they would cancel the procedure. She was crying. She sent over the urgent request via email." "I didn't send an email," I whispered. "We released the funds," the banker said. "The entire balance, to the checking account on file." The checking account on file was a joint account I had set up for Cole years ago for emergencies. An account my parents also had access to. "How much?" I asked. $178,000, he said. I hung up. I felt like I was going to throw up. I tried to call Cole. Straight to voicemail. I tried to call my father. Voicemail. I tried to call Valerie. Voicemail. I spent the next 10 hours in a panic. I thought maybe something had happened. Maybe Cole had an emergency. Maybe he was dying. Maybe they tried to call me and I didn't answer because I was in meetings. I checked my email again. I looked at the sent folder. Nothing. Then I checked the trash. There it was. An email sent from my account. Someone had logged into my personal email. Subject: Urgent Transfer Authorization. The language wasn't mine. It was full of exclamation points. It was dramatic. "My brother is dying. Please release the funds, Valerie." It sounded exactly like Valerie. I still held onto a tiny sliver of hope that the money was used for the hospital. Maybe they just panicked. Maybe they were trying to save him. Then, I opened Instagram. I saw a post from Cole. He was standing in front of a massive log cabin lodge. There were string lights everywhere. There was a banner that said Cole's 27th, the legend continues. He was wearing a white suit. He held a bottle of champagne. He looked happy. I scrolled, there were videos, a private chef cooking steaks, a live band playing on a stage built into the grass, fireworks going off over the lake, gift bags that looked like they cost $500 each. The caption read, "Best family ever. Thanks mom and dad for making this happen. Number birthday king, number influencer life, number blessed." I sat on the edge of my hotel bed in London. The room was silent. They hadn't paid the hospital. They hadn't saved his wrist. Valerie had impersonated me. She had used my personal information, which she knew because she was my stepmother, to steal the money I had saved for 10 years. And they spent it on a party. They spent $178,000 on a party for a 27-year-old man who was sick. They blew it all. The fireworks alone probably cost 10 grand. The lodge rental, the catering. I looked at Cole's wrist in the photo. He was holding the champagne bottle with his left hand. His right hand, the sick one, was hidden in his pocket. He knew the money was for his surgery. He knew I had locked it away to save his future. And he let them take it. He drank champagne and danced while his joints were destroying themselves. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a loud snap, it was quiet. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing. I packed my bags. I left London early. I didn't tell them I was coming. I flew to Asheville. I rented a car. I drove to the house. It was Thanksgiving. They were expecting me to come for dinner. They were expecting the good daughter to show up, smile, eat turkey, and not ask questions about money. They thought I would never find out until it was too late. Or maybe they thought I would just forgive them like I always did. They were wrong. I arrived at the house. I walked in. I sat down. I asked the question about the surgery. I watched my father laugh. And then I told them, "I guess you still don't know who actually needed that surgery." And that's where the dinner ended, and the war began. I didn't stay for dessert. After I dropped that sentence, I stood up and walked out. I left them sitting in stunned silence. I drove to my own house, a small, tidy place about 20 minutes away. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from adrenaline. As soon as I got home, I opened my laptop. I didn't go to sleep. I went to work. I logged into every single account I had ever shared with them. The credit card Cole used for gas. Cancelled. The auto-pay for Cole's penthouse. Cancelled. The insurance payments for the BMW. Cancelled. The Netflix password. Changed. The Amazon Prime family account. Deleted. I cut every financial cord that connected me to them. It took me 3 hours. By 1:00 a.m., I had severed 10 years of financial support. I sat in my living room, waiting. I knew they would come. They wouldn't come because they were sorry. They would come because their credit cards had just been declined at the bar or the gas station. At 2:15 a.m., headlights swept across my front window. I heard car doors slam. Then the pounding on the door. "Ava, open this door right now." It was my father. I walked to the door and opened it. I didn't unlock the screen door. I stood behind the mesh looking out at them. They were all there. My father, red-faced and furious. Valerie, looking like a victim. Cole, looking annoyed and tired. "What the hell is wrong with you?" my father shouted. His voice echoed in the quiet neighborhood. "We're trying to get gas and the card didn't work. And Cole just got an email that his rent payment bounced." "I know," I said calmly. "I canceled them." "You can't just cancel them," Valerie shrieked. "That's not your money to control, that's for your family." "It is my money," I said. "It has always been my money, and now I'm keeping it." "You are embarrassing us," my father yelled. He stepped closer to the screen door, getting in my face. "Do you know how bad this looks? Cole has a reputation. You are being petty and vindictive just because of a little party." "A little party?" I looked at Cole. "You stole $178,000. You stole your own surgery money." "It wasn't stealing," Cole shouted. "It was family money. Mom said it was fine. I needed the exposure, Ava. You don't get it. The party was an investment. I'm going to make double that back in sponsorships." "You have arthritis, Cole," I said. "Your wrist is rotting. You need surgery, not sponsorships." "Stop being dramatic," Valerie spat. "He's fine. You're just jealous because we celebrated him and not you. You've always been jealous of him." That hit me. Jealous. I had given up my 20s for him. I had given up my savings for him. You have 24 hours, my father demanded. Turn the cards back on, reauthorize the rent payment, and put the money back in the joint account. If you don't, there will be consequences, Ava, big ones. He looked at me with a look I had never seen before. It wasn't a father looking at a daughter. It was a predator looking at prey that had decided to fight back. You need to learn your place, he hissed. You exist to help this family, that is your job, now fix this. I looked at the three of them. My father the bully, Valerie the thief, Cole the leech. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The fear was gone. No, I said, the word hung in the air, it was small but it felt heavy. What did you say? My father asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I said no, I repeated. I am not turning the cards on. I am not paying the rent, and I am definitely not putting more money in that account. I am done. The bank is closed. Valerie gasped. You ungrateful little bitch. Get off my property, I said, or I will call the police. My father laughed. A cold, ugly laugh. The police, against your own father. You wouldn't dare, you're weak, Ava, you've always been weak. He reached for the handle of the screen door and rattled it violently, trying to rip it open. I said get out, I screamed. It was the first time I had raised my voice. He stopped. He looked at me, realizing I wasn't backing down. He stepped back, straightening his jacket. Fine, he said. He pointed a finger at me. You want to play hardball. We'll play hardball, but remember you started this. Don't come crying to us when you lose everything. Let's go, he told the others. They walked back to the car. Cole looked back at me once. He didn't look sorry. He looked angry that his free ride was over. They drove away. I locked the main door. I engaged the deadbolt. I slid the chain across. I leaned my back against the door and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. My heart was pounding like a hammer against my ribs. I knew my father. I knew he wasn't making an empty threat. Consequences. I thought the worst was over. I thought the confrontation was the climax. I was wrong. The theft was just the beginning. They weren't just going to cut me off. They were going to try to destroy me completely 3 days after the confrontation on my porch. I thought the silence meant I had won. I thought my father had realized he couldn't bully me anymore. I went to work. I bought groceries. I started to look for a new apartment because I didn't feel safe in my house anymore. I was wrong about the silence. It wasn't a retreat, it was the calm before an ambush. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I was heating up leftovers in the microwave. There was a knock at the door. I froze. I checked the peephole. It wasn't my father. It was a man in a uniform, a process server. I opened the door. Ava Ramsey? He asked. Yes, I said. You have been served, he said. He handed me a thick, heavy envelope and walked away. I closed the door and sat at my kitchen table. My hands were shaking as I tore open the seal. I pulled out a stack of papers. The first page had a stamp that said State Court Probate Division. I read the title. Petition for Emergency Guardianship and Conservatorship. I didn't understand. Guardianship was for elderly people with dementia, or for people in comas. I read further. Petitioner, Robert Ramsey, father. Respondent, Ava Ramsey. I started reading the allegations. My breath caught in my throat. The respondent, Ava Ramsey, has suffered a severe psychotic break. The respondent has a history of unmedicated bipolar disorder and severe paranoia. The respondent has ceased all communication with family and is exhibiting erratic, dangerous behavior. The respondent has attempted suicide twice in the last 6 months. The respondent is currently abusing prescription narcotics and is a danger to herself and her finances. I dropped the papers. They slid across the table. Lies. Every single sentence was a lie. I had never been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I had never attempted suicide. I didn't even take Tylenol, let alone narcotics. They were trying to say I was crazy. I read the request at the bottom. They were asking the court to grant my father full legal control over the respondent's person and estate. They wanted control of my bank accounts, my house, my medical decisions. They wanted to strip me of my rights as a human being and put me under their thumb. This wasn't just about the $178,000 anymore. This was about total domination. They wanted to seize everything I had so I couldn't cut them off ever again, and they had evidence. Attached to the petition were affidavits. One was from a friend I hadn't seen in 5 years, claiming she saw me doing drugs at a party. One was from a psychiatrist I had never met, claiming he treated me for a manic episode. There were invoices for a rehab facility I had never been to. They had forged everything. They had paid people to lie. Panic set in. Real, cold panic. I paced around my kitchen. I felt like the walls were closing in. If a judge believed this, I could lose my freedom. I could be locked away. My father could legally force me into a facility and drain my accounts while I sat in a room with barred windows. I needed a lawyer, not a nice lawyer. I needed a shark. I spent the whole night researching. I didn't sleep. At 8 a.m., I called Claire Donovan. Her reviews said she was aggressive, expensive, and hated bullies. I met her at her office 2 hours later. Claire was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair cut very short. She didn't offer me coffee. She took the papers from my hand and read them in silence. I sat there, twisting my hands. "It's all lies," I whispered. "I have a job, I have a clean record, I've never done drugs." Claire looked up. "I believe you," she said. Her voice was dry and serious. "But the court doesn't know you. In guardianship cases, the burden of proof is terrifyingly low in the beginning. If your father cries enough, and if these documents look real enough, a judge might grant a temporary emergency order just to be safe." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We fight," she said. "Guardianship is a weapon. People use it to control elderly parents for their money, but parents using it on an adult, employed daughter, that is an act of war. They are trying to erase you, Ava." She leaned forward. "They have made a mistake, though," she said. "They got greedy. They forged medical records. That is a felony. If we can prove these are fake, we don't just win, we bury them." She handed me a notepad. "I need you to write down every interaction you've had with them in the last year, every text, every email, and I need you to go to your bank and get certified copies of everything. We are going to build a fortress around you." I left her office feeling a tiny bit stronger, but I was still scared. I knew my father. He wouldn't stop with just paperwork. He would try to make the lies look real. I went home. I locked the doors. I closed the blinds. I didn't know that while I was meeting with Claire, my father was making another phone call. A call that would bring the war to my front door. 2 days later, the trap tightened. I was at work trying to focus on a spreadsheet. My phone rang. It was my health insurance provider. "Miss Ramsey," the agent asked, "we're calling to notify you that your policy is under review due to the high volume of claims submitted this week." "What claims?" I asked. "I haven't been to the doctor in a year." "We received claims for emergency psychiatric hold, 3 sessions of crisis counseling, and a toxicology screen from Asheville General Hospital," she said, "totaling $47,000. I stood up. My chair rolled back and hit the wall. "I was not at the hospital. Those are fraudulent." "They were submitted under your dependent ID," she said. "Your father is listed as the guarantor on your old family plan policy, which is still linked to your file." He had used my old information. He was creating a paper trail. He was generating medical bills to prove to the court that I was sick. "Cancel them," I said, my voice shaking. "Flag them for fraud. I am hiring a lawyer." I hung up. I felt sick. They were destroying my credit, my medical history, my reputation. I drove home early. I was afraid to be in public. I felt like everyone was looking at me, like maybe I looked crazy. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you question your own reflection. I got home at 5 p.m. I ate a piece of toast. I sat in the dark living room, afraid to turn on the lights. At 1:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound that freezes your blood. Heavy pounding on the door, not a knuckle knock, a police baton knock. "Police, open up!" Blue and red lights were flashing through my curtains. They were lighting up my whole living room. I grabbed my robe. I ran to the door. I opened it. 2 police officers stood there. They were big. They had their hands near their holsters. Behind them on the sidewalk, I saw my father's car. He was standing there with Valerie. Valerie was crying into a tissue. "Ava Ramsey?" the officer asked. "Yes," I said. "We received a call from your parents," the officer said. "They reported that you called them threatening suicide and that you have a weapon in the house. We need to come in and do a welfare check." "That's a lie," I screamed. "I didn't call them, they are harassing me." "Ma'am, step back," the officer said sternly. He pushed past me into my house. "You can't come in," I yelled. "I have rights." "We have probable cause, ma'am. A credible threat of self-harm." They searched my house. They opened my drawers. They looked under my bed. They looked in my medicine cabinet. I stood in the hallway, hugging myself, shivering. My neighbors were coming out onto their porches. They were watching. They saw the police cars. They saw me standing there in my pajamas. I felt humiliated. I felt naked. My father was watching from the street. He looked concerned. He was putting on a performance for the neighbors. Look at us, the worried parents, checking on our unstable daughter. The officer came out of my bedroom. No weapon found, he said to his partner. No drugs found. He looked at me. He saw that I was shaking. He saw the terror in my eyes. Ma'am, have you been drinking tonight? He asked. No, I said. I have work in the morning. Please, you have to listen to me. My parents are trying to force a guardianship. They made up this call to make me look unstable. The officer looked at me, then back at my parents on the sidewalk. He looked at the paperwork in his hand, the fake psychiatric claims my father had likely shown him. Miss Ramsey, if we get another call, we might have to take you in for a 72-hour observation, for your own safety. I am fine, I said, trying to steady my voice. I am safe, please leave my house. They left. They walked down the driveway. I heard the officer say something to my father. My father nodded and looked disappointed that I wasn't being dragged out in handcuffs. They drove away. I closed the door. I locked it. I pushed a heavy chair in front of it. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with my phone, recording a video diary. I stated my name. I stated the date. I stated that I was sane, sober, and safe. I sent it to Claire. I realized then that they weren't going to stop until I was destroyed. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted a prisoner who could pay their bills. The hearing was set for Friday. I had 3 days to survive. Friday morning was gray and rainy. I wore my best navy blue suit. I pulled my hair back tight. I wanted to look severe. I wanted to look like the most sane, competent person on earth. Claire met me outside the courtroom. She looked calm. She was holding a large file box. Ready? She asked. I'm terrified, I said. Good, she said. Use it. Anger is better than fear today. We walked in. The courtroom was small. It smelled like old wood and floor polish. My parents were already there sitting at the petitioner's table. They had a lawyer, a cheap one, a guy who looked like he slept in his suit. My father looked at me. He gave me a sad, pitying smile. Valerie dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Cole wasn't there. He was probably too busy pretending to be rich on the internet. The judge entered. Judge Holloway. She was an older woman with glasses on a chain. She looked tired. Docket number 405, she read. Guardianship of Ava Ramsey. My father's lawyer stood up. He started the performance. Your Honor, he began. This is a tragic case. Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey love their daughter deeply, but she has spiraled out of control. She has cut off contact. She is spending money erratically. We have evidence of a psychotic break. We are simply asking for temporary emergency powers to get her the medical help she refuses. He submitted the affidavits. The fake doctor's note, the fake rehab bill. My father took the stand. He cried. He actually produced tears. I just want my little girl back, he sobbed. She thinks we're her enemies. She's not herself. She's sick. I sat there, digging my fingernails into my palms until they bled. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table, but I sat stone still. Don't look crazy. Don't look crazy. Then it was Claire's turn. Claire didn't cry. She didn't use flowery language. She stood up and walked to the center of the room. Your Honor, Claire said, this petition is not an act of love. It is an act of fraud. It is an attempt to enslave a financially successful woman because she stopped paying her family's bills. The judge raised an eyebrow. Call Dr. Nolan Beckett, Claire said. The doors opened. Dr. Beckett walked in. He was wearing his white coat. He looked serious and professional. My father stopped crying. He stiffened. He didn't know who this was. Dr. Beckett took the stand. Dr. Beckett, Claire asked, do you treat Ava Ramsey? No, he said. I treat her brother, Cole Ramsey. And what is Cole's diagnosis? Aggressive rheumatoid arthritis, Dr. Beckett said. Who paid for his treatment, his tests, and set up the trust for his surgery? Ava Ramsey, he said. She was the sole financier. She was the only family member who attended appointments. Claire walked to the table and picked up a piece of paper. Your Honor, I am submitting Exhibit A. This is the bank transfer record showing the withdrawal of $178,000 from the medical trust. And Exhibit B, the invoices for a birthday bash occurring on the same day. Claire turned to my father. Mr. Ramsey, she said, did you use the money for your son's surgery? He stammered. Yes or no? No, he whispered. And now, Claire said, regarding the respondent's mental illness. Your Honor, we have subpoenaed the records from the rehab facility listed in the petition. She held up a letter. The facility has no record of Ava Ramsey ever being a patient. They have confirmed that the invoice submitted by the parents is a forgery. The ID number on the invoice belongs to a cafeteria worker. The courtroom went silent. The judge slowly turned her head to look at my parents. Her expression changed from boredom to cold fury. Claire wasn't done. We also have a sworn statement from the witness, who claimed to see Ava doing drugs. She admitted to our investigator yesterday that Ava Ramsey paid her $500 to sign the affidavit. Claire dropped the paper on the table. It made a loud smack. "This is not a guardianship case, Your Honor," Claire said. "This is a criminal conspiracy." Judge Holloway looked at my parents. My father was pale. Valerie was shaking. They looked small. They looked like caught children. "Mr. Ramsey," the judge said, her voice was like a whip. "Stand up." My father stood up. He looked wobbly. "I am dismissing this petition with prejudice," she said. "That means you can never file it again. Furthermore, I am ordering you to pay the respondent's legal fees in full." She shuffled her papers. "And," she continued, "I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office. Forgery, insurance fraud, and filing false police reports are serious crimes. You will not leave this courthouse without speaking to a marshal." She slammed the gavel. Bang. It was the loudest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I let out a breath I had been holding for weeks. I looked at my parents. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the floor, terrified. I stood up. I walked past them. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken for me. Justice didn't happen all at once. It happened in a slow, painful cascade. The district attorney took the case. My parents weren't arrested immediately, but their lives were frozen. Their assets were seized during the investigation. They couldn't access their accounts. Without my money, and without their own money, their house of cards fell down fast. 3 months later, the foreclosure notice was stapled to the front door of my childhood home. They couldn't pay the mortgage. They couldn't pay the utilities. The lights were cut off. Cole was the first to fall. Without the surgery, his arthritis advanced just like Dr. Beckett said it would. His right hand seized up. He couldn't hold a camera. He couldn't edit videos. He couldn't style his hair. He lost his apartment, the penthouse I had paid for. He had to move back in with our parents, into the dark, cold house that was being foreclosed on. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Cole tried to keep up appearances on Instagram for a while. He posted old photos. But eventually, the facade cracked. He stopped posting. His career as an influencer evaporated because he had no content and no money to fake the lifestyle. He applied for disability benefits. He was 27. My father and Valerie lost their reputation. In a small town like Asheville, court records travel fast. The country club revoked their membership. Their friends stopped inviting them to dinners. They became pariahs. I didn't visit them. I didn't call to gloat. I didn't have to. I focused on my own exit. I put my house on the market. I didn't want to live in the same city as them. I didn't want to run into them at the grocery store. I wanted a clean slate. I sold my house for a profit. I paid off my student loans. I paid Claire, my lawyer, although my parents were legally debited for it later. I got a job offer in Charlotte. It was a promotion. Better pay, a new city. Before I moved, I had to do one last thing. I had to change my name. I didn't want to be Ava Ramsey anymore. Ramsey was a name that meant theft. It meant manipulation. It meant conditional love. I went to the courthouse, a different courtroom this time. I filed the paperwork. I chose the name Ava Mercer. Mercer was my grandmother's maiden name. She was the only one who had ever just loved me without asking for anything. When the judge signed the order, I felt lighter, physically lighter. The chain was broken. I heard later that my parents ended up in a small, rented trailer outside of town. My father was working part-time at a hardware store. Valerie was selling cheap jewelry online. They were miserable. They blamed everyone but themselves. They probably blamed me, but it didn't matter what they thought anymore. Their voices were just noise in the distance, getting quieter and quieter as I drove away. On my last day in Asheville, the house was empty. My boxes were packed in the moving truck. The keys were on the counter for the new owners. I decided to drive past my parents' old house one last time. I don't know why, maybe to make sure it was real. I parked across the street. The house looked sad. The grass was overgrown. The sold sign was in the yard, but it was a bank sale. I remembered the Thanksgiving dinner. I remembered the cold turkey. I remembered the way my father laughed when he told me they stole the money. I waited for the anger to come. I waited for the sadness, but nothing came. I felt Nothing, just a quiet, flat piece. It was like looking at a stranger's house. The ghosts were gone. I had exorcised them with the truth. I put the car in drive. I turned on the radio. A song I liked was playing. I drove toward the highway. I rolled the windows down. The air smelled like pine trees and rain. I looked at my hand on the steering wheel. It was steady. It wasn't shaking. It was the hand of a woman who had saved herself. I thought about Cole. I hoped, in a distant way, that he would learn to live with his choices. I hoped he would find a way to be a person, not just an image. But it wasn't my job to teach him anymore. I thought about my parents. I hoped they would find peace, but I knew they probably wouldn't. They were trapped in their own greed. But me, I was free. I merged onto the interstate, heading east toward Charlotte, toward my new apartment, toward my new job, toward Ava Mercer. I realized something in that moment. For 34 years, I thought love was a transaction. I thought I had to buy my place in the world. I thought if I just paid enough bills, if I just solved enough problems, I would earn the right to be loved. I was wrong. You don't earn love, you don't buy respect. And you certainly don't owe your life to people just because they share your DNA. I looked in the rearview mirror. Asheville was disappearing behind the trees. I smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. I am allowed to leave. I am allowed to keep my own money. I am allowed to let people fail. I am allowed to choose myself. If you are reading this, and you feel like the invisible engine of your family, if you feel like they only love you when you are writing a check, please listen to me. Stop the car. Get out. Walk away. It will be the hardest thing you ever do. They will scream. They will cry. They might even send the police. But on the other side of that fire is a quiet, beautiful life that belongs only to you. And it is worth every single penny.